Katrina Kennedy. This is so exciting. We've just been talking a little bit offline and it's been a long time coming, but what a gift it is to speak to you on my podcast. So for those people who don't know who you are, give us the overview.
Excellent. Well, I am a facilitator, trainer, consultant, and author of the book Learning That Lasts. I spend my time supporting subject matter experts and trainers so that they can help create learning that does last.
I love that. So needed, actually. And I love that you work with experts and I always say they should be our best friends because, we need to take out of their brain and make it stick. So yeah, I love that. All right. So Katrina, let's travel all the way back in time to young you. I don't know when your first job was, teens, 20s, I don't know. But what was that first paycheck that you ever got, that first little bit of independence, doing something for yourself?
Well, if we go way back, the first money that I made was actually I was 9 years old, and they put me on the back of a truck, and I stamped with a purple stamp grape boxes that were picked up from the vineyard, went on the truck, and then would be taken away to where they're shipped out all over the world. And I made 3 cents a box. So I was quite the entrepreneur. I made lots of money and showed up at school with very purple hands. And I think that lit just that early, oh, I can do this thing and I will get something from it. Then, proceeded into a whole slew of weird little jobs, from babysitting to working concession stands at a rodeo, to ultimately, I raised, this is so weird, Candice, I can't believe I'm telling you this. I raised rabbits. And I sold rabbits. And so that was my entrepreneurial project from probably the time I was about 13 until I was 16. So I got this taste of working for myself and putting things out there and seeing what would result from that. So those were my first real jobs. Not real jobs. They were very odd.
Yes, very odd. And we need to get into this because it astounds me. So I thought that I started working super young. I was 14 and I went and worked at a school after school every day. I thought I was so young. And then I interview people on my podcast, and 9, I have a 10-year-old. He's very entrepreneurial, but, he's earned some money, but still, I think my question always is, what made you want to go and do that? You're 9. Why are you just not enjoying summer or whatever it is? What do you think in you made you do that as a 9-year-old? I'm so curious.
That's funny because I think that's a question I'm still exploring as a not 9-year-old. What makes me do the things that I do? Mm-hmm. I think at 9 years old, I was a huge reader. And my family did not have a lot of money. So if you wanted something extra beyond just necessity, you were expected to earn the money for it. And so I realized if I earn this money, I can go buy the books that I want to read. And then I can own them. I won't just have to borrow from the library. So it was almost this necessity to have the extra little perks and things in life. I think something that, not my child didn't have to worry about, but was definitely something that I think marked my generation just a little bit differently than others.
Yeah. I love that hindsight of that. But, truly, you could have also just decided that you don't need those books that badly. So, there's always the two sides of this coin. And I find it absolutely, fascinating. I was definitely driven to the independence of it, not needing to ask my parents for money and all of that stuff. So, there's always some element that pushes us to do that. Okay, so you had very purple hands as a little tiny 9-year-old. And then you said you did babysitting and the raising rabbits. Did you so you bred them and then raised them until you could sell them, kind of like puppies, I'm guessing?
So, okay, this is weird because it's not something I would do today in any way. We sold them like you would puppies. We sold them for people, to have as pets. We also, this is so troubling. We also butchered them and sold them for meat. So, we did it all. And it was I showed rabbits because there are these rabbit shows where you go and you compete to see who has the best rabbit. And once you, this is going in places you never expected, right?
Which is the whole point of this podcast. I love it. I love it.
And so when you have a rabbit that wins at a rabbit show, then people want to have rabbits from that lineage. So I had the show rabbits, I had the pet rabbits, and then we had the rabbits that people ate. So it was very diversified as a 12-year-old.
12-year-old diversified portfolio based on rabbit. I love this. I can't love it more. This is so cool. I think we could probably spend the whole hour just on your childhood by the sounds of it.
It was maybe an odd one. I don't know.
Where did you grow up? Because you said you also had concession stands at the rodeo. So, where about did you grow up?
So I grew up in the Central Valley of California, which is, the farm producing area for the world. And so very rural. And I grew up on a farm that my dad managed for someone else. And so, having animals, having crops, having all of that was very much just a part of my upbringing.
Awesome. Yeah, I've never been there. My husband actually went and he said he just cannot even grasp the size of the production that happens out there in rural California. So yeah, hopefully one day I get to see it. All right. So you're 12. Now you're going into high school. Did you do high school, typical track, or did you go to college after that? Tell me about those sort of, later teen years.
Sure. So high school, I was, the nerdy kid. Which I know probably does not come as a surprise, and did very traditional 4 years of high school. And my graduating class was 163 people. So it was a really small school. And then my whole goal from about 9 years old was to leave the valley, leave the farm, leave that whole thing. So I went to school in the University of California system. I went to UC Riverside and graduated from there with a degree in sociology and a minor in English.
Okay. All right. And when you were studying that, what did you plan to be?
That's a great question. I was not sure at all what I wanted to be. I knew that I wanted to get a degree. I knew that was the goal. And honestly, I think, I graduated, I'm gonna share my age because, not everybody makes it this far, right? It's a gift. I graduated from college in 1991. And the story that I was told in college and around that time is that if you got a degree, there would be a job. There wasn't necessarily much conversation about, the path to that degree or that job. It was just get the degree, a job will appear. And so I didn't know what I wanted to be. So as graduation date, appeared, then you start scrambling for everything that you could do. So I took the CBEST to become a teacher. I applied to a PhD program. I later, a couple years after, applied to law school. So I'm just scrambling to do anything to figure out what I was going to be when I grew up.
Yeah. Yeah, that sounds pretty common, I would say, is not many people know what they want to do while studying, after studying, all the things. So from there, what sort of jobs did you have? How did you figure it out? Let's tell that story of, how did you find something that you actually enjoyed, that you actually wanted to do? Did that come immediately or later? Yeah.
It came later, and I kind of fell into it very accidentally. So that year after, I graduated in June, and I got a job. I got a job at a jewelry store. I don't even know if they exist anymore. Afterthoughts. It was kind of like a Claire's where you can buy jewelry for young girls. You can get your ears pierced. And I had that job for 1 month, and it is the only job I've ever just left and never told them I just didn't go back. I could not pierce people's ears. It completely freaked me out. I did one of my mom's ears, and then I couldn't do the second. And but they didn't let me go because I could work the register and I could talk to people. But I got an opportunity to take a trip to Canada with a friend, so I got in a car with her and never called in, didn't do anything, and just never went back. Yeah. But after that, I saw a job posting for a family support officer position with the district attorney's office in their child support division. And I applied. They hired me. So that was by August of after graduation. And they hired me to enforce child support. So I got to ask parents really personal questions about their interactions with the other parent and establish paternity and do all kinds of related legal work. And while I was there, during that time, I got bored. I went back to school to get my master's. So I was working full time and getting my master's in human resource management and development, simply because I heard an ad for it on the radio and was like, okay, that sounds interesting and I'm bored, so let's do that. And then as it happened, the family support division was going through a big hiring a large number of people. They had no training program, and they reached out, or they needed somebody to do it. And my manager literally said, Katrina can talk, she can do it. And so I became the trainer, not in title, but in role. And I trained all of our new hires and supported all of the learning and development in the district attorney's office child support division. And then we worked with a consultant, and I sat down with him and said, how do I do what you do? How can I get out of here? And he showed me, and so I went out on my own. I had worked for the district attorney's office for 5 years. So I was, only 5 years out of college, and decided, no, I'm going to be my own boss. I'm going to provide training to people in whatever it is that they need. And that was almost 29 years ago.
Wow. Okay. Amazing. So we're going to have to dig into this a little bit, because I am very sure that job was hard. And you were, so not the training side of it, but even the people you had to deal with, the situations, the circumstances, everything around that job feels heavy. And, you're not going to walk into a custody thing or, child support and it's wonderful. That's probably very rare,
Right.
to put it mildly. So tell me about some of those harder times, those harder client interactions, and how it built you as a person to be a little bit stronger, a little bit more resilient, maybe more empathetic. Just share a story or two with that.
Perfect. So there are kind of two sides of it. So one side was actually, working with the absent parent and the custodial parent. They don't use those terms anymore, but they were the terms that we used at the time. And so, I remember one in particular, man who came in, we served him with papers and he's like, this is not my child. And so then you have to go through the whole process of, establishing paternity and testing and all of those things. And then, to have to tell somebody, well, yes, it is. And, here's your recourse, but that's on you. We've established what we need to establish. And seeing, how much people's lives were impacted. Because one of the hard things in child support at that time is that, it was, I think this is still the case today, that custody and support are separate issues. So that's for another court, that's for another whole process to determine custody. So difficult to watch people, both mothers and fathers, who were required to pay a huge amount of their income and not be able to have interaction with their child. And then there are also the stories of like some really unfortunate situations with typically men who had children with multiple people, and all of this is happening when I'm, about 22, 23, 24 years old and probably pretty naive, and just discovering this whole side of the world that I was pretty sheltered from. People were interesting. But the other side of it, and the side that probably impacted me the most, is that we were going through, and this term just cracks me up to this day. We were going through a computer conversion. So we're going from like dumb terminals, right, that did nothing, to what they called a paperless system. So all of these giant files were being converted, and we had this very, at the time, sophisticated system. And I was told, I was on the conversion team, so I was working in the new system whilst and beginning to use the processes of the new system. And we had a paralegal who was probably in her mid-60s, really, really smart, really knew her stuff. And I was told to not allow her to have the paper files for the cases she was working on. And she came to me and asked for a file because they were going to court, so she needed the file. And I had to tell her, it doesn't exist. You have to go into the system. And at that point, she had not had any training on how to use the new system. She'd been given access to it. And her whole role was to prep everything to go into court so that the attorneys knew, had everything in order so that they could make it as smooth for everyone as possible. And it was just this moment that she was angry. She was angry at me. And it was a moment that changed how I look at how we present new systems, how we change things, and made me realize, like, that there was really something missing, and that just telling her no was not an effective way to get anyone to want to like use this new system that we were ultimately going to be required to use. I can still see her face. I can still hear her anger.
Yeah.
And I'm sure, she probably carried a lot of anger towards me for a very long time.
Yeah, I'm sure you were the gatekeeper. You were the face of that no. So yeah, I can imagine. All right. So and I can see how that would impact you because and especially what you do now, and it feels like you found where you belong. What you were meant to do, and so that must have been really hard because I can imagine, me getting angry of saying, "But have we enabled this person?" So that side of it. So yeah, I get that. And yeah, I guess with all of those things, and I mentioned it earlier, but it must have given you some empathy, some perspective, going into your own business. How do you think that helped you set you up with the skills you needed to run your own thing?
Well, I think it gave me, as you said, empathy without a doubt, and gave me a perspective that when I am working with people, that I will often say whether it's a class, whatever I'm doing, but if it's a class at the beginning, I have probably said in every class something along the lines of, I know you don't want to be here. I know this is not your choice. I know this is hard. I know there's a manager who probably should be here in your place. I know that, the old way was easy and it. I think I've said something like that, just acknowledging what people bring, acknowledging that, that any time we're asking people to do something different in the workplace, anytime we're asking them to learn something or change their behavior, it is a change. And it's not small, where we are toying with people's sense of comfort and stability and confidence in the work they do. And we can't take that lightly.
Oh, I love that. Toying with their sense of comfort and confidence. Yeah, I'm writing it down. That's amazing. I mean, and that is true, and we're the people there in the front of the room, let's say, telling people how it's going to be. And yeah, we literally, that is such a good perspective. Show notes for sure. All right. So, and now you've been running your own thing for 29 years. So this person, you said this guy, this consultant that came in, you didn't say these words, but kind of took you under his wing, or at least showed you the path or something like that. How did that influence your start, getting a person that could show you the ropes?
So he gave me the worst advice I've ever received. And so I followed that for probably about 15 years. And I didn't know that it was the worst at the time. And I can't completely discount it because it got me to where I am. But he told me, I said to him, I want to train trainers. I want to help them understand how people learn. I want to help them be better at what they do. And he said, there is no market in that.
Okay.
And I said, okay. And he said, do anything anyone wants you to do. And so I said, okay. And he showed me how much I should charge. He showed me when I'd want to quit. And it was like this whole bell curve, when I'd want to quit. And if I could stay past that 5-year mark as an independent consultant, I would be successful. And so I did. I trained telephone communication, customer service, dealing with difficult people. That was like 15 years of my life dedicated to how to overcome difficult people. Leadership, management, supervision, like you name it, I did it, which gave me a really good base and built a reputation for myself. But I also was completely exhausted because I was constantly redesigning. I was constantly creating. I was constantly making something and not ever feeling like really confident with what I was doing. And then about 15 years ago, I decided that I am going to pivot my business. I am going to become a trainer of trainers, and we'll just see what that does. And it was the best decision I could have made. I did not lose any of the clients that I already had. I actually increased the work that I was doing with the existing clients, and then was able to add more. And I think it's because my depth became so much better. Like I knew I could focus in on fewer things and make those adjustments and make them fit the audience. Like it just really changed how I was able to do my work.
I love that so much. So, and honestly, you can't discount the first 15 years because, and what I have found now, I'm into 20 years of my career, and I can confidently say that I can train you on anything. Like give me anything, any industry, any country, any topic. I can do it. I don't need to be an engineer to train engineers. I don't need to be, all of those things. And I think that's probably what the first 15 years gave to you, so that now you can confidently go in and train these trainers and perhaps give them some of that confidence. So I do want to know more about these 15 years and, what does it look like? What do you do? Who are the people you work with? And we'll get into your business and stuff. I just want to know about your experience and how you empower them.
Yeah. So I did a lot of work with state of California government employees in virtually every job imaginable. You name the position, from like analysts to engineers to scientists, like everybody and anybody. And, and I early on, I took a very interactive approach. I didn't really, have a name for what I was doing. I didn't really follow anybody's idea. I just knew that it worked. Like, it felt good to ask people questions. It felt good to have them practice. It felt good to see them try things on. And so that was very much my early method of training people. And I got really lucky early on to get exposed to the work of Thomas Gilbert, which changed how I thought about training and performance. And so that was really helpful early on. I dabbled in lots of other industries. I had the opportunity to work literally with rocket scientists. It was one of, I feel like I have to place things because, things like email were newer. Things like the internet was newer, which, really ages me. But I had, one of my clients, I never actually got on the phone with them. It was all a series of email exchange. I flew across the country, got off the plane, and hoped they were there. And they were there, and they were real. And I did, I was able to do this amazing work with a group of rocket scientists who just trusted me. They just trusted me. I would not do that kind of work in that way today.
Things change all the time, right?
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
I think it's so important to remind ourselves as we're going through this really bizarre changing time right now. Okay, we'll look back and, I remember the first email I sent at work. when it was like, ooh, we can do this thing.
Yeah.
And one of the first clients that I had, one of the first long-term contracts I had was with a custodial staff that we were working on interpersonal relationships and communication for people who worked the graveyard shift. So they're working at night. Most of them were choosing to work that time so that they had less interaction. They're choosing to work at that time because it's maybe a second job. So they're tired. And, I'd like to think I did good work. I don't know that it was my best work. Again, we look back and we learn so much by just looking back of what we would do differently going forward.
Mm-hmm.
I probably talked more then than I do now. I probably was a little more lectury than I am now, if I'm really honest.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So because you've done this and you've run again, assuming, but because you've been in your company for 29 years, I'm assuming you're running a successful company. And in today's age, so much is changing. And I speak with a lot of people who are considering going into consulting. And, I think my first thing I say to them is, look, it's hard. There's nothing easy about it. Running your own business is super hard, but if you want to do it, jump in and then I coach them. But in terms of your advice for people today, what would you say to them to start, even if they're considering, right? So they still on the fence. They're wondering, do I jump into this consultant world or do I stay looking in corporate? Give us some advice for those people. There are many of those types listening to this.
I think the advice that I would give myself today if I was starting, and I would give anybody, is that you can go out on your own, but don't do it alone. Align yourself with people who can support you. Align yourself and maybe even, subcontract for a while. Find someone who can help make that transition. It can be a very, very lonely place out on your own. And having a group of people to problem solve with, having a group of people to get ideas from, having a group of people that you can talk about pricing. I think I run into so many people and have so many conversations with people who have difficulty just figuring out how to price themselves. And unfortunately, I run into a lot of women in particular who are undervaluing the work they're doing. And that's, I've traveled that path. Mm-hmm. And I think we all have to be careful of undervaluing, because that will lead to ultimately you're going to work too hard, too much, and not be able to be successful.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Excellent advice. I love. So the two pieces is find people. And this is something that I have learned. I am now surrounded by the most incredible people. But at first I was like, I'm going to figure this out all by myself. I'm so independent. And you just burn yourself, exhaust, like I can speak from personal experience, exhaust myself trying to figure it all out, cry over trying to send some email sequences. It's just unnecessary is now how I see it. It's like, it is unnecessary for it to be so hard and for you to know everything because you cannot. So the back of this question, or slightly different angle, and I really love to ask this question because we're in this stage of, instant gratification. We often think we need to be far more successful than what we are, so we can look at ourselves in the mirror and think, I'm just nowhere near where I want to be, and look at all these Instagram people who are earning, $1 million per day, and all they did is 2 hours of breath work, and you're like, stop. So the question I love to ask people, what does it really take to build this career, this business that you're proud of, that you want to work in, that you enjoy?
For me, this is such an easy question because it's the advice that I give most people. For me, it took deciding what I truly needed versus what I wanted, and defining that in a dollar amount. That so I wasn't always like, it's not always about more, more, more. It's about, here's my goal that I can live the lifestyle I want to live with this amount. And then that allows me to look at the work that I need to do so that I can do the work that I want to do and have that financial goal in mind. Otherwise you can spend a lot of time just spinning your wheels trying to do everything to get to some unknown place. And when I'm doing the work that I am best at, it benefits my clients, it benefits me, it benefits my family. And just being really clear on what it is that I am best at. And then also, I know this veers away from your question some, also being really willing to pivot as the world changes, as needs change, as we change as individuals.
Yeah, that is good. Do you have a list or a recommended, I don't know, journal prompt, question to ask yourself to get to what you're good at and what you enjoy? And that might feel obvious. It feels obvious to me because I've done the work and now I like 100% know. But there was a time when I was like, I could do so much. There's so many things. So how did you get to your place of, I know I'm good at this, my clients benefit?
So I'd like to say, like, I journaled every day and I looked back on that journaling and this is what I discovered. I've done a tiny bit of that, but not enough to like be able to claim that that's why. I think I really pay attention to how I feel. And when I feel the most positive, and being aware of that is, a good indicator of what I should be doing. And I can tell you, after a lot of years of working with people, I feel best when I am hearing from people that they are able to use what I'm doing with them. When I hear from them that they've been successful, and when I have a relationship with them. I have dabbled in and out of thinking that I wanted to be a keynote speaker. And I realized after doing some that there's not enough relationship there. And that relationship piece is something that I need. And so, just paying attention to that feeling, paying attention to how it feels when I get on a plane to go somewhere. Like, do I feel energized or do I feel drained? Do I feel like this is, am I catastrophizing? Like maybe the plane will, veer off course and I'll end up someplace else. So I won't have to do this. Just really listening to what's happening in my head.
Oh, beautiful advice. Honestly, I think we don't take that breath and just feel the feelings. I had a podcast guest who admitted that on one of her trips, she was hoping the plane would crash. That's how scared she was to do what she was about to do. And I just feel like, even now in my heart, I'm like, to have that feeling must be grateful, right? Like, so just to even be aware of that and, what's causing these thoughts.
And listen to the difference between fear and being scared and being challenged and deciphering the difference between those.
Yes, 100%. This is a beautiful intro into why did you write your book and, how it all came together.
So 9-year-old Katrina wanted to write a book. I think
Whoa. Were you
9-year-old Katrina, I just had some
chanting purple
aspirations.
things and you were like, this needs to be in a book?
I didn't even know like what I wanted to write the book about. Like I just knew like I'm going to write a book. Like I'm a book lover. I want to be one of the people who has written a book.
Oh.
And I've written 3 books that sat on my shelf or on my hard drive, and I never did anything with them. And then I had a moment. I was on a podcast with a dear friend, Paul Briley. His podcast is Off the Comma, where he talks to people about like these life moments where you've moved off of something that has been holding you back, and usually his podcast is about like you've moved forward, and I was like, nope, I am stuck right here. I want to do this. I've never done it. And he was the catalyst for me to finally reach out to a publisher and say, hey, I've got these ideas. And the publisher didn't want the books that I had written. Understandably, they were a mess. And we were able to work through ideas, and we landed on Reflection. And it just made absolute sense for me, for who I am. When I told my son that I was going to write a book on reflection, he just looked at me and said, Mom, of course you are. And
I love that.
Knew it needed to be.
That's, yeah. Oh, Mom, of course you are. Isn't that all, everything you needed right there
Exactly.
In that sentence, right? Okay. And then, so tell us a little bit about the journey. I know we're kind of coming towards the end, but I'm always curious. And for those people listening, journey of writing a book, where to start, how hard is it?
So I got great advice from my dear friend, Cassie Labori, who said, find your buckets for your book. And so I identified my buckets, which ultimately became the 8 chapters of the book. 2 chapters on what reflection is and how to use it. And then the remaining chapters are each dedicated to an outcome that we get with reflection, and have activities. In fact, there are 46 activities outlined for those outcomes. And so once I had that structure, it became really a very reflective process, because they're all activities I've used. They're activities that I share, why I like them. I share how I've used them. I also share how they can be altered. Mm-hmm. So the writing went quickly. I had a very, very fast deadline that I'd given myself. And so I signed my contract in February, and I delivered the first manuscript in October. So it was fast.
I'm just doing the math. Okay, 8 months.
Yeah, exactly.
8 months. Okay.
So I wrote it in 8 months, but I'd done.
But
it was in
you. It was in you. I feel like you just had to get it out. So, I mean, as you know, I'm also writing a book, and that's what my editor is saying. She was like, you've been a writer this whole time. You just haven't written a book yet. So, like, I feel like that was you. You had written this book already.
Exactly. And I'd done the work. These aren't activities I made up. They're activities that I had used and over again, and had real experience that I could bring to them. Mm-hmm. And then, as we talked before we started recording, the development process, editing process was hard and long, and but produced a better book that I think is more usable, and I'm proud of.
Mm-hmm.
And
that is good. That's all you need to be proud of it yourself, because then you can talk about it with that energy. So that's awesome.
Exactly.
Yeah. Okay. So I'm going to ask you our final question, and then we'll come back to who you work with. But the final question of this podcast is, if you could go back to young you, now I'm not putting anything in your mind, but it's probably your 9-year-old self, what would you thank yourself for doing then that set you up for who you are now and the life you have now?
Okay, this one. So I'm a very emotional person, so I'm going to try to do this without crying. We'll see. I would absolutely thank my 9-year-old self for kind of dreaming big dreams and believing they were possible.
Yeah. Oh, I love that. Yeah, getting goosies. That is, I mean, isn't that everything, right? Thank you to 9-year-old you.
Yeah.
Love it. I absolutely love it. Thank you for sharing that. So now, for people listening and they thinking, I have to get this lady in my life. How do I work with her? Who do you work with? How do you work with them? All the things. And of course, we'll add links. So don't say links, but just who should contact you? Why should they contact you?
So if you have established training that you want to refresh, you want to contact me. If you are a new trainer and you want to know how to be a better trainer and facilitator, you need to contact me. If you have never designed anything and you're a manager of people who don't have a lot of design experience or facilitation experience, you want to contact me. And my favorite group that we often we might say less than nice things about, if you are a subject matter expert who is asked to train in your organization, you absolutely want to talk to me because you are my favorite people to support.
Yeah. I can see how that is. Awesome. It has been an absolute pleasure speaking with you. It was so good to learn more about your story. I hope your book just soars and soars and soars. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you so much, Candice. It was great being here.